You are now tuned into the People Before Politics radio show, brought to you by the good folks at
Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester. Check the newspaper. Black Westchester, Black Westchester, Black Westchester. Check the newspaper.
Real talk for the community since 2014. For those of y'all just tuning in, you are watching Black Westchester Presents, the People Before Politics radio show. This is episode 339, where we have been giving you the real talk for the community since 2014. As you see, this is a special episode. We started an hour early today because all three of these conversations were conversations we need to have. Our next guest, definitely want to welcome her to the show, Deputy Commissioner Jen Lackard, who has been doing a lot of good work with the Mount Vernon Police Department and mental health, and the introduction of the new wellness division. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. See, now, remember that day you saw me at Jamal? He's like, you don't remember me? See? Nah, I got you.
You see, I wouldn't leave either, right? I was like,
yeah.
I was like, who am I?
And I was sitting here like, I know she looked familiar, but damn, I was like, yo. But yes. Now I know, because I've been talking a lot to Glenn, the commissioner, Glenn Scott, Mount Vernon Police Commissioner, for those not inside of Mount Vernon, and other people. And one of the things they were telling me early on, and you can speak more to this, this is what I heard, like, we have a lot of calls and we have a lot of repeat calls to situations where there may be a mental health situation, and you were making a list of these so that you would know, like, for the future times when they go to these calls, you would know what kind of response to send, because one of the things we have been talking about on Black Westchester for the last 8 years is every call does not require a badge and a gun, but our communities and our government cuts all of the services, so the police department is the only 24-hour agency who can answer the call. And that's where we lie with the problem. And they brought you on as the deputy police commissioner, and this has been your charge to work on that. So as an introduction, I'll let you speak on that.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. And about time. I've been in Mount Vernon for a year and a half, and I was like, oh, they invited me. I felt so special. I must be doing something big if you invite me on. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here today just to talk about some of the work that we're doing in the PD. But you're right. So there's a, where do we start? So when I was brought on to oversee several areas. One of them was police reform, which at that time was the hot topic. Commissioner Glenn Scott was already looking at bringing some sort of new initiatives to the department prior to George Floyd, unfortunately, happening. And he and I had met on the mayor's public safety transition committee. He had just got brought on, and I was asking certain questions just because I didn't understand as a department how we were doing and handling certain things. And I was an outsider at that point. And then later on, he asked me to come on board, but I think he already had a thought about the direction he wanted to go. And then obviously police, George Floyd happened in May, and he had already had me in his crosshairs to sort of bring on board. So I oversee police reform, which has sort of some quality components to it, like how is the department operating from a quality perspective and how we can improve that. Most recently, the DOJ investigation fell under my purview, but wellness was another, and it was at that point officer wellness, and then reentry of people who are formerly incarcerated, because that really is where my strength is, as well as
that's how we met.
Yeah.
And our schedules, because you had a little publication, you used to have meetings, I think, at Grace, and we were supposed to bring you on, and we were supposed to collaborate on some stuff, and it just never happened. And But that's how I originally met you.
Yeah.
And Ken Bright has spoke highly of the work that you were doing against recidivism and all that. So
yeah, Ken is my man. We he worked so hard on the reentry side and really trying to pull people together. At that point, we were doing a support group for people who were formerly incarcerated, just trying to give them the space to, just digest the stressors of kind of being formerly incarcerated, trying to do the right thing. What does that look like? Dealing with barriers, dealing with just nuances, because the system is not designed really for people to come back and get on, their feet and do it right. Really is not designed that way. If you look at reentry and how things are set up in a way, parole and community supervision, how all those factors, those actors play together, it's not really a fair system in terms of housing and employment for people to get back on their feet. And so Ken was really a partner with me in terms of creating that pathway inside of Mount Vernon. And reentry really was my baby. But I used to do reentry behavioral health 15, 20 years ago when it wasn't sexy. And, where at that point I was really concerned around the intersection of people who were coming out of like trying to get themselves back into a path of recovery, trying to get on a mental health plan of recovery. And then we realized that those same individuals, when let's say they got clean and they were in recovery, now if they have a criminal record, we can't get them housed because that record shows up. We can't try to get them employment because that record comes up. So we looked at the reentry as a third barrier to reentry, and really kind of only my clinical agency at that time only looked at people that had a criminal justice involvement, right? Whether it was in a beginning where it was probation as an alternative, or whether or not they were on the line to go back to jail as a violation and they came to us for treatment. So in that space, which was again 10, 15 years ago, we trained law enforcement because law enforcement didn't know how to really interact with our clients. So we knew our clients. Our clients were severe, persistently mentally ill. They were on the streets. We knew all the triggers. We knew what to do. And so we worked very closely with law enforcement. And we've done a lot of crisis intervention training. And now you hear that. But back then it was just starting. CIT was just starting. So when I took this post, I kind of in my mind knew exactly the direction I was going. That was really probably the first things that I said I was going to do when I got the post. Most people expected me to really pick up the torch on reentry because that's what I was doing in the community. But because I knew from doing the reentry work how significant mental health and substance use addiction was in the community, I was really trying to figure out how to get law enforcement to do the things that I was training officers to do 15 years ago in another state. And so when I got in, probably within a month, I met up with Amy Gellis from the Guidance Center. She's the former CEO that was there, and just was talking to her about how we could work together because my agency used to be like a guidance center. So I'm thinking, well, if I could connect with a multi-service organization that delivers these services, right, and then figure out how we can partner, whether or not we can go after some grants together, and then we can kind of work in a collaborative space, whether it is co-located, where we have crisis responders co-located with us, this would be a good fit. So she probably was the first person I reached out to after I got sworn in because it was that important to me. And then come to find out, she had a grant that she was already working on or had already applied for, was awarded, and she was able to sort of leverage that grant partnership to then provide us with a clinician. And then the conversation started to become about whether do we co-respond? What does co-response look like? How can we do that? And it started with me going through our records. And as we would get calls, I would just look in the system to see, who was this person? And we had all the information in front of us. We knew who this person was. We knew where they lived. We knew kind of the people who they had conflict with. We pretty much knew what their diagnosis was because someone said it in the call or it came out that everything you say to a police officer gets documented. And so we had all of the information, like, to put all the pieces together. Just no one was going back and pulling it together because that's not our job. Like, law enforcement is to, like, in that moment to kind of come in and get involved in the crisis. They're not involved in after the fact, oh, let me go double back and see how I can help. They're just there to kind of de-escalate and resolve the immediate crisis. So that was kind of how it started, with tracking who these individuals were that we ran a lot of calls on. They were our frequent flyers or our friendly faces. And then kind of trying to figure out what that crisis safety planning looks like if we were to go back to those individuals when they were not in crisis and say, hey, listen, so we know this is going on. When this happens again, who would you like for us to call? Is there somebody you want us to call that you think that could be helpful in a moment? Is there something that we should do? What should we not do? And those things I was training officers 15 years ago to do. And you found out that it was really, really helpful, because sometimes officers go out and they do the one thing that agitates a situation, and they don't necessarily have to do that, but they don't know how to engage. And that's one of the ways you can de-escalate some of the situations. So we started that way. My list it got up to the hundreds. Shortly after, I started realizing, okay, we have to do something. You can't have that many people who are constantly in crisis in this city and we not do something. And that's kind of how this baby was born.
So now you have, and it's been documented in the news. You started it. There's a new wellness division. Explain what that is, where that is, and why that is.
So I was sworn in as the Deputy Commissioner of Special Initiatives. But if you know anything about doing this work, programs and initiatives can go away. They can go away after I leave and I'm long gone. Commissioner Scott is on. We're on. Mayor Sean Patterson Howard is on the greener pastures. Everyone's doing other things in their lives. What's the likelihood that my program or initiative is going to stay? And I was really fearful of trying to pull this together in a way, and then it goes away. And that seems to be the case with most cities, but predominantly in Mount Vernon, where I see this disinvestment, right? This divestiture of resources that should be in the city. And then it goes away for some reason and it never is given back. And so I didn't want what I was starting to go away. And the only way for me to do that was because I had a commissioner that was 100% behind this and really cared about the community and what we could do to sort of infuse these resources. I wanted to create a division. And so that division changed the entire organizational chart of the department. So now it's there. It's not away. It's not, something they can turn around and move away with later. And so this division got started. Last year, we had the permission to sort of move forward from the commissioner. We trained 10 officers. 5 of them had left the department. And then we were able to keep 5. I'm actually 4 left the department. We were able to keep 6. One became a sergeant and another one is a youth detective. So we were able to have, with those 4, create the division that we started. February 1st was when the division was officially, the order came out. And then we've been operating soft launches since March, with different staff coming in and co-locating with us since March 1st. So we've been responding to calls alongside patrol. And really being a support, and really what I would like to think, dispatching human service resources, not police resources in a time of a crisis. That's been what the Wellness Division has been doing. But there's 4 officers that are dedicated to that division. We are at an off-site location off of Gramerton Avenue. So when people want to come in and they need to speak with someone, most people who are in crisis don't feel comfortable walking into the police department. So we wanted to create a safe space for people to come, small and intimate, where they can come and get help, assistance, and there's always going to be someone there. The guidance center has, we have a clinician from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at that site. So there's a clinician there that can assist with linkages and referrals. And even if there's short-term therapy or anything that needs to be done in that moment, that clinician is there to kind of literally provide services on site. And then from 4 to 12, we have our homeless outreach team, again, from the guidance center that's co-located in that space to help us with getting people to housing between on the tour 3, that late night shift. Because of our low staffing, we won't be able to kind of have another pick at officers until September, when our new officers come out of the academy. But we hope to get more officers so we can do a midnight to 8. So we'd be 24 hours. Right now, we're just 8 a.m. to midnight.
So let me ask you, so for people who are watching live, and then when I put it on the website, a lot of people end up watching this later on and see what, everybody in the community is always like, we need these things. What can the community do to help you be more efficient at what you're doing?
Well, so there is this challenge with communicating with law enforcement, and I get it. It's about building public trust, which may not have been there for some time, but we really want the community to know that they can reach out to the wellness division. The commanding officer is Lieutenant Krista Mann. She's 17-year veteran of the department, Mount Vernon zone. And so she runs that division, and we want to create a space where people feel comfortable. If you know someone that's in crisis or is always involved with law enforcement, always getting in trouble because this is going on or that, feeling free to let us know, because we're not looking at it from a tactical perspective. We're not looking at it from an investigative perspective. We're trying to see how can we use our position to connect the dots for individuals and really kind of hold everyone accountable for what they should be doing for people who are in crisis.
And I think more of what I'm asking too is, is there a way for civilians to come in and be trained to give you more manpower in what you're doing?
Oh, so I was approached. We had an event at the library last week, and I was approached by someone who does conflict mediation and wanted to see how he can partner. And I was like, absolutely. Let's sit down and talk about what your interest is, how you think you can help. And then, there are certain things that we have like sort of on a wish list. We'd love to do restorative circles around particular topics, and we just need people to help us do that. Most of our partners are already willing to sit down and do that work with us. But if we have people from the community who want to do that, pick up the phone, give us a call, and we will, have the conversation to see how we can work together. Absolutely. We don't have a budget. We don't have a budget to pay people, but yes, definitely people want to volunteer.
Right. And that's important, because sometimes there are people sitting at home, it may be retired or something, or, money is not something they're hurting for, but they can help get involved. And if, they don't know that there's a chance for them to get involved. That's why I put that out there to, I think that's very important. I've been going to a lot of community. We've been having a lot of groups, and a lot of community stakeholders have been having meetings on how we move forward after the murder of Kayla Green. And during one of the groups, as somebody else who speaks very highly of you, Coach Dwayne Murray. And he always speaks highly of you. And there was some stuff we were talking about, and I think, it was talking about looping him being the link from the group to you, I guess to fill you in and seeing how we could work together and support you and something like that. So he speaks highly. He definitely speaks highly of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so there are all of these cross-pollinations with the work that we're doing, right? So there's 8 subpopulations or core populations that we focus on, because those are individuals we find have a high risk and a high need. And those individuals are people who are homeless, mental health, that are dealing with a mental health issue or substance use issue, youth, as we've seen, aging and elderly, particularly if they have dementia or Alzheimer's, and we have issues with them wandering and getting out. Like, that's a huge safety issue. Veterans, definitely those that have been like dishonorably discharged and they don't fit inside of the veteran category where they can access resources. Those are the individuals we want to be able to help. They've served our country, and for whatever reason, they were not able to get that honorable discharge. Most likely we found because there was some mental illness. They went AWOL, they walked out, something that didn't make them eligible for general discharge. And those individuals are just kind of really just out there without any support. So when you look at the populations that we serve, domestic violence is another one. When you look at the populations that we serve them, but there's these cross-pollinations to these other subpopulations that could support, right? So for youth, there's an opportunity for us to engage parents and really try to figure out what a coalition would look like of parents that are really trying to get support for their kids, get more information, or that want to volunteer. If you're looking at individuals who are like aging and elderly, you also have the caregivers who are now the younger caregivers, right, that are looking for support, but there's a coalition that could be built built amongst them. So for all of the 8 populations that we've just identified, because there's a lot of synergies within those 8 as well, there's also another group of individuals or several that we could also connect to in other partners. So what Dwayne Murray is talking about and many others, there's always opportunity for us to connect with those individuals. And we really want to create like these community building circles that really it transitions. It should not be PD. PD should be able to identify and support because we're the ones that are called at the time of crisis. But we also should be able to pass the baton to community stakeholders who are looking to help take it across the finish line. And we can still support that effort as well. So we definitely want to have conversations with anyone who's interested in working with us, because we've got a lot of work to do. And there's, this isn't an easy feat. So we definitely need as many partners as we can get.
Damon, I know you got a couple questions.
So this is, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming on. I think a wellness center is very important, especially in a city like Mount Vernon that has been systematically putting trauma, right? From systems. What is the support from county and state for something like this?
So the wellness division is a Mount Vernon created initiative that's coming from sort of my shop.
Right.
County and the state are not currently supporting our effort. I don't know, financially. We do have a behavioral health advisory council that members from counties sit on that. And when we meet monthly, they're able to give input. And definitely when we're running interventions on the different individuals we're trying to divert, we definitely pick up the phone and call them, and they're of support to us, but not as intentional or like married in terms of a partnership.
Right. Okay. All right. And I say that, because there are studies that show, the response that you have with this wellness clinic is also a certain response of county and state policies that have purposely put people in need in a 4x4 square mile city. So the how you address it will be different than they will address issues in White Plains, right? Because the demographics are different. And I asked that question because, there is a need for Mount Vernon to have revenue for different programs that they wouldn't have in White Plains, or they wouldn't have in Scarsdale, or they wouldn't have in other places because of the demographics.
Absolutely.
And I definitely think that the county legislators and the assembly people and the Senate should get behind something like that, because it's definitely needed and it needed to be addressed. Second question. Okay. How are the officers trained, and what type of training do they get?
So county did help us with our training. So they came down and did a 40-hour. First off, all of our officers get crisis intervention training coming through the academy. So they get that. If they're a veteran officer, like we had some veterans that came part of the training that ultimately did leave, those officers may have gotten it early on in their time. So even though if I go through their training records, everyone has had CIT training, I made them, if they were coming into the unit, get more training, because sometimes it's not something you make the connection to, but then also it's also not something you need to see it in the right context. So when the county came down, I also wanted to have Mount Vernon specific resources and community providers be a part of the training. Right. So I don't want us to talk in, theoretically. In theory, this is how it happened. No, we will transport to the Mount Vernon Hospital. We get the psych department to come over and talk to us about what that looks like. Right. Many of those were relationships that I had started shortly after I had come on, because I was just really trying to figure out what I was dealing with. But I wanted the officers to know, this is what happens when you're in crisis. When this doesn't work, this is who you call. And if you can't, you call me. Like, we need to have a way so that they know that we have a high crisis coming down the pike. Okay. Right. If not, here are the local outpatient facilities this is the facility that's here. They may know names, but it was good to make those connections for them, because now it's like, aha, now I get it, right? Now I realize what's happening. When we talked about Article 941s, which are involuntary commitment, it's when law enforcement take individuals into custody because they're a danger to themselves or others. There were some even issues in terms of what we did as officers, like how we handle things, that it was good for them to, after they got this training, they're looking at it and saying, oh, well, then we should be handling it ABC. Like now they're being proactive and looking at where the gaps are. It's not someone telling them what to do. They're seeing from the other side what it feels like. So the crisis intervention training is what they do. I also try to give them very specific training on, like they did the youth mental health first aid training, any specific training that comes in with the population that we're talking about, reentry specific training, trainings around veterans, DV specific training, we go ahead and get them. So they're really going to, over time, really become like this hyper trained unit, but really around these 8 specialty populations, so that they know how to engage, what to do, who the resources are, and who to connect people to.
I'm glad you said that. You know, I've done a few stories on dealing with mental health, mental, what they call a mentally disturbed person, I guess, right. Individual. And this is when Ernie Davis, towards the end of his administration, there was an incident where the mostly disturbed individual had, you know, I guess the cops had to show up, and there ended up being a big shooting or whatever. And we asked all the questions, you know, are the Mount Vernon Police Department trained? And it found out that most of the officers were not trained in how to even deal with an emotionally disturbed individual. And then in my coverage of stories, I found out in many of the municipalities, a lot of the officers are not trained, and that becomes the problem. The EMS people and everything, you know, other people were trained, but there was no training with our officers who were being asked to respond to these situations.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I'm glad that you.
Yeah, I mean, there were basic things. I mean, and this isn't about putting the department on blast, because a lot of the stuff people already know, like what the department was doing and was not doing. But when we came in, you know, we were finding that there was just even a misunderstanding about when we receive involuntary commitment papers, you know, how do we do that? When are they executed? How long are they, you know, how good are they for? And then once we were able to figure all of that out and then kind of create a protocol, all right, this is how it's supposed to be done. You know, these papers don't expire. We need to make sure that we're constantly going out and looking for that person, because they've met this need where they're a danger to themselves or others. Let's go ahead and get out there and pick them up. Let's figure it out. This is the thing I love about Mount Vernon, is that they work, like they know what they're doing. They really understand what has to, and if they don't understand something, they're willing to at least learn or figure it out. And so it took a short time, but we got to the point that now almost every involuntary commitment that comes through the city of Mount Vernon now, we execute. We're pretty much getting them on the first tour. It doesn't have to get passed over to the second tour. They're figuring out, okay, let's look it up. Where do they go? Because usually the commitment papers don't come over with a lot of information. It just kind of has the person's name, and then we have to kind of do the digging. But in the back end, really creating a system where we're making sure we're going to do it. It is a public safety issue. If someone has met that bar and they're out on the street, we want to get them into care as soon as possible. And that's also another sort of window for me to say, we've had an involuntary commitment on someone. Let's put them on our list for us to follow up with them and see when this is over, or even keep in contact with the hospital to say, how can we help? You know, are you making sure they're getting referred to services? Are they going to be out in the street? You know, and then when we follow up, when we knock on the door, the officers in the beginning, the residents were like, why are you knocking on my door? But now when we're really coming because we're concerned about you, how can we help? How can we connect the dots for you? We find that people are really more agreeable to working with us, particularly wellness, because we're trying to figure out how to help them, right? It's not, we don't want to keep running calls on people. The whole goal of the wellness division is to stabilize people in the community, and people who we know typically may not be taking their meds, may, you know, be in an unhealthy relationship in their home, and that relationship is exacerbating sort of the challenges that they may have. There's all this stuff that's happening. And when we know that information, trying to deliver and, you know, dispatch human service support to them is really where I think we've been helpful so far.
So I mean,
Go ahead,
so
Bob. I mean,
so in a nutshell, you're addressing social ills before. Well, you're addressing social problems before they become criminal problems.
Absolutely. And in a city like Mount Vernon, where our resources are so small, right? When we're responding to a crisis, it's reactive. And if that crisis is big, that's where the fact that we may not have as many officers on the street, you feel it because now you're trying to go all over the place and figure out how to deal with a situation. When you're dealing with it proactively and you're really trying to address it before it gets to the point of a crisis, now we're keeping those calls down, so we've gotten comments about, oh, there's not enough people on the street and you created another division. For starters, this division was supposed to be up almost a year ago, right? So we delayed it to try to figure it out. And a lot of the challenges that we have in the department has been us just trying to figure out how to still make this work. But my officers in the wellness division or the wellness division officers, they respond to calls that come over the radio all night from 8 a.m. to midnight. So if they hear a call, someone in crisis, they're showing up and then potentially assisting the patrol officer so that they can then go respond to another call if it's something that they can wrap up or they can close or they can support. So they're really an additional help and really saying, all right, in the moment, in the time of a crisis, they may not be necessary in that moment. They might be collecting information, okay, figuring out who's who, making an introduction. But then tomorrow when it's out of crisis, they may be following up and that person is not so much of a stranger to them. Or in a crisis where you have like a youth, let's say having a psychiatric episode, the adult is the one that's really kind of trying to figure out how to connect the dots. And we've been very, very helpful to the adults because they're the constant person keeping up with them, helping, giving them resources while they're at the hospital, things what happens when they come out. So like we're literally running the whole gamut.
Is there any identification on the uniform of the wellness officer that that person can identify that different from the patrol
good
officer?
question.
Yes. So we will have different uniforms. We will wear polos, royal blue polos that look similar to the CPU polos that people may have seen that has the MVPD logo on it, but it says wellness under the logo.
Okay.
That's a very good question. And when I first saw the article, I guess News 12 or whoever, I thought this would be a great opportunity. Our city needs to see something positive. They need to see something. We have a problem nationwide with police community relations, and they need to see what's going on, like the work that you're doing. You know what I'm saying? I was talking to my sister recently, and she lives in Northern Virginia, and she pays high taxes. But she says every time she leaves her house, she can see her tax dollars at work. Like, I wanted to show people, this is your tax dollars at work. Like, there's not too many examples where you could actually see that. And Absolutely. This is something that, unlike those other interviews that give you, little short clips, you know what I'm saying? I wanted to have an in-depth interview that we can share with the community so they can kind of get a better understanding. And that's why I asked what can they do and what, that kind of stuff. So, I think it's very important.
And something really important to talk about here is that to get this off the ground really didn't cost. There wasn't a budget to get this off the ground. I literally leveraged relationships with every partner I could possibly to get this going, right? And so the city, in terms of committing the resources, we just have officers who are dedicated to this. The location that we're in is a building that used to be a city-owned building, and we were able to get that space, and that space was built into like a 99-year lease that we would always use that as a police substation. And so all I've done is now put us inside of a location where we don't have to cover the rent for that space. We established a relationship with the guidance center, which through their clinical, they're able to give us clinical staff and other staff to do the homeless outreach and things like that. So we're not paying for those clinical staff or outreach people. We also have a relationship with Choice Case Management, who will be coming in, providing us peer specialists and peer recovery. So we're partnering with other organizations, and even sort of in my background, you'll see there are about 20 different organizations who are part of the wellness precinct, right? They sit on my behavioral health advisory council, which again, I was sworn in July of 2020. Those councils started in September. just started getting people around. Like, if you're in behavioral health, let's have the conversations around this. I have a reentry advisory council. We also meet once a month and we talk about that. The reentry advisory council just hosted our second reentry resource fair at the Dole Center this past Friday. And that's where we have providers, Ken Bright, many of the reentry task force, Reverend Rose. We have many different partners who sit on that council, and they're there with tabling. Snug was there to give resources for individuals. Westchester Barber Academy was giving free haircuts. We had a restorative circle. So it's really the space to look at the different subpopulations that are in Mount Vernon. They exist. When I was doing reentry, Mount Vernon and Yonkers had the highest number of people coming back from incarceration into the city. And so let's be real. Let's not talk about what we want people to think, but we have people who are in crisis, who are struggling, who are trying to make ends meet. And so I'd rather have a realistic pipeline and a plan to say, let's connect you with the resources. And if those resources are not working, hold us accountable. Come follow back up, knock on our door and say something. I got an email last night. One of the sergeants, Sergeant Lloyd, sent myself and Lieutenant Mann an email saying someone called the police precinct and said he wasn't able to make the resource fair. He's a 5-time felon. What resources does he have? Guess what? He's getting a call first thing tomorrow. We're going to bring him in, figure out what we can do. Like, that's just not traditional policing. That's not what police departments do, but that's what the Mount Vernon Police Department is doing. And I am going to ring every tree, every bell to get as much money to support this, because it's something that we need. And it's something that we created because when I got here and I realized how we didn't have much of anything, but these other departments did. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So Mount Vernon doesn't have that. Okay, well, then we'll create something. We can't, if we call and we need help and someone's getting government funding or county funding to provide those services, but yet Mount Vernon's not able to access that, then we'll create our own plan to meet the needs of the city. And that's what the Wellness Division is. Anyone who wants to support that and enhance what we're doing in the Wellness Division, I am 400% for. Our partner will do whatever we can because it's for the people and it'll benefit them. But the Wellness Division comes from our department, comes from the city, and we're going to continue to make that work. And anything that people can do to help us enhance it, tell us, inform us, this isn't working, it needs to be something else. I'm open to the feedback because that's the only way it's going to be successful.
I think I'll try to find, if I still have the information of the contact of Washington, DC it's called the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens. Mm-hmm. And they do a great job in DC. Mm-hmm. They do a wonderful job in DC. You know, I used to communicate a lot with one of the founders of it, and a lot of people that support it. And that's, you know, that's, to me, that's the same thing that you have here in Mount Vernon to that point. And it's good. I mean, it's needed. I mean, it's really needed.
Well, so when I was doing it at Grace, so I used to run the prison ministry at Grace Baptist Church before I got this post, right? So I that was kind of my post, and what many people do know me for in the city is from that work. And so when I decided to come over to policing, and even when the commissioner interviewed me and told me, no, I want you to bring all that stuff to Mount Vernon, I was like, even the reentry stuff? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, bet. Because in my mind, he's realizing this is a need, right? And so if you want to use me, I'm like, now you sure? Because what I do is not cookie cutter. Like, I kind of go outside and start doing it. I think he's realizing really that I am relentless. I don't give up. So if I'm committed to something, I'm like, my mom used to always call me a mad dog. Like, I don't let go, because if my heart tells me that this is the right thing and I prayed on it and this is the direction I need to go, this is where I'm going. I'm open to feedback, but the more that we look and we talk to people in the community, these are resources that need to be here. And so whenever we're no longer serving the community, then we'll move to whatever that is. But I want the Wellness Division to be an agile organization that responds to the needs of the community. We are getting feedback because we're accessible. We're in the community. We're having events. We're keeping our lines open. We try to make ourselves approachable so that if something is not working, I ran into a Facebook person who I just knew his name, and he came into the resource fair on Friday, and he said his first name. and said, yeah, I've been following you on Facebook. And it was something about the way he said, and I called his last name. I said, by any chance, is this your last name? And he said, yes. And I said, yeah. And I commented on one of the comments that he made. I don't really engage on Facebook. I feel like that can be a little dangerous. So I don't really engage in that. As soon as I saw his name and I said, I'd love to talk to you. Once you come here today and get whatever you need to get, I'd love to talk to you to get your feedback, because I remember the comment that you made and I want to know what made you make that comment. And so it's that open dialogue. I'm not going to get it right all the time, right? And if I don't get it right, I'm open to having that conversation. Now, I'm not going to say at the end of the conversation, I'll go your way, but I'm open to hearing, what is it what makes you feel this way? And how can we coalesce on these issues? And I really want to hear. I'm not from Mount Vernon. Maybe I'm not looking at things, the right way. And at the end of that particular conversation, which there needs to be a part 2 to that as well. But at the end of that, he said he didn't know the things that was going on that I had said. He was like, I didn't realize that was an issue. So maybe that was my comment, was thinking of it from a narrow standpoint. So there's learning from both sides, right? We're never all going to get it right. But the willingness to really be about community and understand that our people they're in trauma. They're traumatized, and re-traumatization is very, very big. And we don't want to look at ourselves from, we're people of color. We don't want to acknowledge that we're in trauma. We look at mental health as a stigma. There's all of this that's kind of like surrounding how people show up. But when I started and the commissioner wanted me to focus on officer wellness and also these other issues, I said, well, we need to have a division that's focused on officer wellness as well as community wellness, right? Because there's the one side that we have to make sure our officers are well and that all the things that are going on in their lives are addressed in a way that they can show up for the community when they're in crisis. But if they don't have their stuff together, or they're still dealing with trauma from an incident, or just depression and anxiety from the nature of their job, right, if we don't put things in place to help support them from an emotional standpoint, then how do we expect them or any member of law enforcement to show up for the community when they're in crisis, right? And in a city where you may have people who are constantly in crisis, right? Where there's multiple, our frequent flyers, our friendly faces, how frustrating that could be. Like, oh, now I got to run a call on this person again. You should never feel that way. Because while they are trained to protect, and they go through the academy to protect, we're learning how to serve the community, and that looks different. Right. And I think that's going to be the interesting walk for all of us.
It's funny because this is one of the conversations we have. And again, I'm not talking about Mount Vernon, I'm talking about policing, period. You know what I'm saying? To be clear, police see a lot on their job that has to have some kind of impact on them. And from my research, you get some kind of evaluation when you first get into policing, but there's not, like, you have to recertify every so many years for you to carry a gun. Like, you should get some kind of, this is one of your greatest weapons, and you should get some kind of, checking, wellness, whatever word we want to put on it, because to ask someone to go through this for 10, 20 years, even 5 years, and see what they see every day in a city like Mount Vernon, that has to be traumatic on the officer as well.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to make that clear. We have to have these kind of conversations so people in the community actually understand that.
So when I first started, I know that there was sort of this they probably had a campaign to get me out the department when I first started. Because I probably wasn't the most, I don't know. I kind of hear all the stories now. It's kind of funny now, but in the beginning when I started, they were not too keen on me. Definitely being a civilian and coming in and really at that position where they didn't know what was going to come out my mouth. And I started talking about wellness, and it was like, you starting to make cops feel uncomfortable because cops don't talk about their feelings. And, you're asking them to come in and really, get in touch with their emotions. And, I remember seeing, reading the tour reports one day, and it was a traumatic incident that happened with a young boy, and it bothered me. And so I kind of reached out to the officers who were on the scene for that call just to kind of get a check to see where they were. And I said, well, what normally happens when this, when something like this happens? And they were like, nothing, you just kind of keep going. I was like, oh, that could be pretty traumatic over, in a city like Mount Vernon, where you could kind of see any type of call. You could see them back to back, for just one tour. And I thought that could be a lot. So at that time, I partnered up with, actually, it's still in place, but that's where MVPD Well started, which was the officer wellness piece of it, where we partnered with, at that point, it was during COVID, and there were different providers that were getting funding through the governor's office for like emotional support for first responders. And so again, I leveraged, like, if I know anything, I'm trying to leverage it from my men and women. So I was like, I leveraged that they had this emotional support for first responders, and I connected that to our MVPD Well. And so what we created was sort of like post-crisis debriefing. So when an individual, an officer is exposed to something, even if it's just not a homicide, but even serious or violent, if I reviewed it and it was something that I was like, you probably should talk to someone, I would send them an email, tell them I care about them, we care about them, as members of the department, and that we wanted them to check in. It's like a 15-minute debriefing. It's free, it's confidential with the clinician, just to unpack what they were exposed to. And in the beginning, there was a lot of laws. I even heard, oh, well, the union's not going to let you do that because you're forcing them to do something. Like, there were all these obstacles that came in. And at the end, it was officers that appreciated the opportunity to just unpack something that they saw. And then the line gives them the opportunity to continue to talk to them if they want to for these short sessions. And some did follow up. Like, we keep the data. We don't know what the conversations are about, but we do keep the data. Who's ordered to call, who makes the call, and then what else is, what else is done after that. So we keep track of the data, but we don't want to know the details of the conversation. We just want to give them that space to just be like, it was one of those days, right? I heard one officer who's like a 15, 18-year veteran of the department say, maybe if I was there, 10 years ago, I could have saved this marriage, or stopped them from going to counseling or whatever. And so it's about, there's a lot for them. They have families, they have lives, they're balancing a whole bunch of things. And so this gives them the post-crisis debriefings, and just the space to talk to someone gives them the opportunity to unpack it in a way that it's not another member of law enforcement. No one knows what they're talking about. They don't have to worry about that being communicated within the department. It's just what it is you being able to focus on you, because you got to hang up that phone and get back to work. Right. And so I want to make sure they are their best self, because when we call 911, we just assume that person that's showing up is at their very best. There's an expectation of that. So we want to make sure that that's done. And that's where the MVPD Well came from. And it's, there are times that sometimes officers now come to me and ask me for the phone number. Oh, can I get that number? I need to give somebody to call. Now I'm not ordering someone, or we're not requiring someone to check in. They themselves are doing a check themselves. Like, I might need to just get this off my chest. Let me just talk to someone real quick. So it's good. It's good that it's there.
Now, and I think it's very important for the community also to hear from you. Like you said, you're not traditionally, law enforcement. I mean, you know what I mean? Like but you're sharing stuff that I'm sure that people that are watching and that will watch have maybe never heard or never had. Sometimes the only interaction is what you see when they come, and you see them on your block and you see what happens. And that's the public's interacting with the police, period. If you didn't do nothing wrong, most of the time you don't really have interaction with the police, which I believe we need more of, and that's that police community relations. But I appreciate you coming on here, so we can start this conversation. Damon, I see you turn your mic on.
I had to turn my mic on. My daughter's calling me about.
No. I thought you had a question. Yeah. No. I thought you had a question. Yeah.
No, she didn't mess me up, man.
Our kids do that.
Because I had to turn it down so y'all wouldn't hear. So
no doubt.
Damn.
But let me say that this is, and I haven't done the research to check, but I do not believe that there is a wellness division in a police department anywhere in the state. I don't think it's in the region or in the state or any of the surrounding states.
You're absolutely correct.
I
Yeah,
know
I
there's
have to
definitely
check.
not in the county. Yes, it's definitely not.
You're absolutely,
No.
you're absolutely
No. I mean, I designed it for the city, but in looking at it, when people ask the question at the press announcement, I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so.
No, not in my 33 years.
And
So,
definitely not
it's-
at this point, at this intensity, the way we're really hooked in to diverting the crisis. And I think all of the, like, what's happening now is people are doing co-responses with clinicians. They have clinicians, they bring them out and they co-respond. There's a lot of liability to that. And we tried to do that last year actually a year or so ago when I first started. But our officers are quick. So they get on the scene and they're trying to move on to the next one. So by the time we would even get a co-responder to come out to the scene, they've moved on, right? And so now we still have that person that still doesn't have that interaction, still doesn't get that support. And so we were trying to figure out how to make it. So what the wellness division is crafted specifically for what Mount Vernon needs.
No, and it needs it. It needs it. But I wanted to jump back. That's there.
Okay.
I just remember. I wanted to jump back to officer wellness because that is something that I think the community itself, I'm going to say our city, county, and state elected officials have not taken seriously enough. When we discuss reform, law enforcement reform, police reform, correction reform, criminal justice reform, those people that work in it, you also have to discuss the mental health and the toll, right, it takes on the officers, right? And I think, you speaking about it, I think it should be a real conversation. And I always tell, the union presidents, you need to be more vocal about it because it doesn't make you a simp, right? It humanizes your job outside of the paramilitary aspect of what policing is, because, when you talk about the post-traumatic stress of a law enforcement officer, right? We need to have that conversation. The state is continually raising the retirement, right? Police was 20, now it's 22, and they're going to do something with the state again and raise it again. 20 years should be enough for anybody to be to be a police officer or any law enforcement department. 20 years is enough. And like I talk about corrections, the average, lifespan is 58 years old, 18 months after retirement. Like who? So they know that we're killing, the job is literally killing people.
Yep.
Right. So we need to have more respect for the job. And part of reform is how do we deal with the mental health of the officer?
You're right. And I think the beauty about creating the wellness division is that it prioritizes officer wellness and community wellness because now it's a division. It is a part of the way a department operates. And then there are these reporting obligations that come out, right? So it makes a lot of the data transparent that people should be able to see in a community. And it creates a conversation about, what are we doing on community wellness, but then what initiatives are we providing for officers and how are we making sure that we're doing things around wellness and safety for our members of service. So we did the Police Reform Commission. We had that. The mayor did that about a year ago. April of last year, we created a report. And so there were 43 recommendations that were on that. And so I'm actually doing an annual report to that. And the goal is every year we then look at those 43 recommendations and then sort of measure our progress for the year against those recommendations. And so that report was supposed to come out last month, but then the wellness division got put up. So we're going to be presenting that at the last city council meeting in May. So we'll release it publicly for the community to review it, and then it'll be a public sort of like meeting in front of city council at that last meeting. Again, making everything transparent so that people see that. It'll be on our website. People can read that. We did a second community survey for law enforcement, for PD. Those results will be on our new website. So we're just trying to make everything transparent as much as we can. Everything is not going to look as great, right? But it gives us a starting point to say, these are the things we need to work on. And now it's, by this being a commitment of this administration, now it's something that we all have to be held accountable for and have those open conversations about where we are.
In the spirit of transparency, like you said, please feel free to utilize Black Westchester when you need to get information out to the public.
Sure.
You know, I've had this conversation with Ernie Davis, and going down every mayor ever since. You know, they do robocalls, they do whatever they do, but there are certain things that do not trickle. I live on South 7th Avenue. There are people here that don't know half of the stuff that comes out of City Hall. Like, it just does not trickle down. And you know, we reach some of those people. I'm not saying we reach all those people, but we do reach some of those people that are not being traditionally being reached. So definitely feel free to utilize us. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, you know, we do all the other stuff too, but this is what we created this format. This
yeah, I appreciate the offer today, because I think it's so important to just get out across various, you know, stakeholders and just people who we would not know, that's for them to understand. So your following is important for them to also know what we're doing, know that we're accessible. I'll leave our phone number so that people can get a hold of us again at any point. Again, 8 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday, until we are able to add on new officers at the end of the year, probably in the fall. That'll be our schedule. We're still happy about being able to offer across 2 tours the service, but you know, we think when we are able to add more officers and midnight to 8 will then be a 24-hour operation. But they can reach me at 914-465-2765. That's the number for our wellness division, and they can call and follow the prompts, and they hit the whatever extension and they'll go directly to someone. So we want to make sure people know we are accessible. If there is a question or a concern about something I'm saying we're doing, but that's not your experience, let us know. Let myself, Lieutenant Krista Mann, know, because again, this is in the beginning. We don't know unless someone says something. You know, you can complain, but you can also tell us and we'll fix it. And so, you know, that's we're committed to doing this and doing this right. And we need this community's partnership to make it successful.
Terry Watson, our earlier guest, who's at Penn State, he wants to know, will you be willing to share outside the state? So
absolutely.
We'll connect your guys, because he said they just did a symposium on this at Penn State. Absolutely.
Oh, and he's in a Commonwealth state. So yeah, things look different in Commonwealth state. But yeah, you know, you customize, it's literally just customizing what your needs are. And there is no budget for this stuff when you first start out. We're creating the conversation and the interest to get the support. But when we first started, there was no budget for it. You know, I was like, all right, forget it. I'm used to grassroots organizing. I'm used to pulling nothing out of, you know, something out of nothing. Just, you know, let me at it. And so I created it. But definitely we're hitting up people to support this work because it's important. It is the intersection of public health and public safety.
I think that's very important, because far too many times when I press leaders or whatever about the need for these programs or whatever, the first thing that is said is there is no money for this. You know what I'm saying? And that's the end all, the be all. Like,
there's money.
Yeah, but like, you know, but you made it work. You found a way to work within and create relationships, which is really important, and build it. If you build it, they will come. You know what I'm saying? So So I want to applaud you on that. Also, we had 3 different interviews. I'm going to edit the show, so all 3 are a separate post on, and so any information that you want that will run under this video when we post it, please send me, the phone number you mentioned, any email, anything, contact, anything you need.
Got it.
I will put that when I put this up, that will go under the video to go. So when people watch this, then they can have the access to the contact information or whatever they need.
Great. Yes, I'm going to drop it now so we can make sure people have a way to access us. And, again, I'm going to open it up for us to also have conversations, because our communication plan needs to be strong, right? We need to know, how do we reach different stakeholders and what that communication, it's not going to look the same for everyone. So I'm looking forward to that partnership with you to just kind of start really customizing what Mount Vernon needs. It may not be what everyone thinks it is. It might be something very specific, very grassroots, and we're willing to do that. So thank you for your giving us the opportunity.
Anytime.
Absolutely. And again, this was needed. Like, you know what I'm saying? This was needed, and this is something positive that the community needs to see. We have there is a lot wrong and a lot negative, but we don't see stuff like this and hear programs or initiatives being put forth. We usually hear about stuff being cut. So,
yeah. You're going to see a lot of us over the summer. Lieutenant Krista Mann, she cares about, this work and doing stuff in the community. When you ask people in the community, who do you know that's in PD, they always say her name and Dave Clark's name. Just certain people that people know. They say Montika's name. There's just certain people that they know. They're Mount Vernon's own, but that's their connection to the department. And so it was very intentional to make sure that I had someone like Lieutenant Mann at the helm, because we care. So I want to make sure that we're getting the word out, but people know, when you see us, when you see those blue polos, when you see us out on the street, approach us. That's our job. We want to do the follow-up. It's not just about in the time of the crisis, but we're there to kind of for the long run. So please, let's figure out how to make this work for the betterment of everyone.
Lastly, is there anything I did not ask you that you want that you want out there, that you want the people to know?
I know. I think you hit on everything. Everything I wanted to mention, you actually brought up. So I think we're good. I'd love for us to partner on a big event that we're going to do in June. So we should talk about that as well for the community, because I think you might like it. So,
all right. You have my number. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.